俺だ。
私だ。守備はどうだ?
Yeah, this one's mine. This is the best episode. The other two were equal, probably the best way to describe them. Now, episode 3 had some fine shit activities going on. Not to mention the character work in this episode is leagues beyond what we got in the last 2. That's not to say what we got was bad. I just think them aggressively expositing to us his awareness of the people around him was only serviceable. It landed, just not for me. But if we think about what I said in my last video, feel free to check it out if you haven't seen it and want more context. But I mentioned him not necessarily being as golden boy as we were initially led to believe. I think in these recent episodes, we're actively being shown that he might be insecure about that. Part of Chitose's strength is his ability to rely on others to support him, as we see in this 3rd episode. But if we're paying attention, I do think that those connections tend to be part of his undoing, as we see him often being wishy-washy in his interactions, especially throughout all 3 of these episodes going forward. At least to me, his concern for his public appearance seems to take priority over everything else. Can't say it's a fact, but let's just look at episode 1 where he cracks a joke about how anyone could see him as anything but perfect. This isn't just a sign of insecurity, it bothers him. And I bet the more that we see him interact with others, the more we will see that he also suffers from the same problems as the people he supports. Like, look at the advice he's giving to Kenta. He does this like that call isn't coming from inside the house. He tells Kenta if people joke or make fun of him to jump in on the joke and to take control and divert the conversation. But we literally watch Chitose bring attention to something that he advises Kenta on, where that if you bring attention or focus on an issue that you have that other people might not see or don't really look at, it now puts that issue in their line of sight and makes it something for them to be concerned with. This is only ironic if you're actually thinking about the things that he says to other people, or if you're actually paying attention to some of the things that he says in his monologue. Those also have some context clues to this stuff as well. But Chitose's advice to Kenta is from his own awareness about how to handle others if they're using something against him. We clearly see Chitose struggles with handling his own internal issues, and it's especially apparent in those scenes of him alone, or scenes like this one with Haru.
優しい女の子にもたれかかることなく、立っていられる、その場所まで。
She got information out of him flawlessly, she cornered him, and used something she knows he can be competent in, then fucking finessed him. But I think he lost this intentionally, and episode 5 is my source. Where we literally see him beat another member of the basketball team, which was Nanase, to quote-unquote blow off steam, then makes the claim that it's supposed to be her game. I am telling you guys, these things are not on accident. We clearly see he is more focused on understanding others to be able to take control of situations and not get pushed into corners. Yet in scenes where he's alone, we see him questioning his actions and processing how things can go for him. So theoretically, if he knows he's not as good as Haru, he probably would not take that bet, because Nanase supposedly is equal to or maybe even better than her, but then lost to Chitose. I don't know, I might be guessing it, but stuff like this, like, you gotta think about it. Everything seems like you could kind of look over it like it doesn't matter. But to me, it seems intentional. Like they're showing us, hey, remember that for later. And every single scene so far kind of feels like, hey, remember that for later. And his defeat to Haru almost definitely seems intentional so that he can hide the fact that he doesn't know how to handle his issues. Him sharing that internal thought of needing to rely on such a cute girl is proof to the point that I'm making. He's better at contriving situations to using others to his advantage. So he came up with a way where Haru would be the one forcing this information out of him, using the image he believes others have of himself against her, so to protect his pride as Chitose Saku. She knows he's not talking unless she forces it out of him, and he knows he can't talk because he is Chitose Saku. And you're clearly shown the shock that Chitose has when Haru provides that clarity that third parties just tend to do. He realized he got lost lost in his head and he wasn't sure how to continue. Him running into Haru, or I guess she ran into him, was something I imagine is akin to the Green Goblin mask for him. Like asking somebody for help just probably isn't really in his nature. But his skill is taking advantage or utilizing others to his advantage. So this sort of just kind of worked out in his favor. But obviously reluctantly, right? Like he doesn't want to do this. But maybe you're not sold on me just yet. Y'all remember Chitose showing Uchida his phone, right? If that was a one-off mention of him being a man whore from him directly, I think we can dismiss it. I don't think that that means anything. But that would be some hella blam writing. And we just casually have 3 instances of him mentioning it. So he just has no way of escaping the insecurity allegations. The first one we see him confiding in someone we're led to believe he trusts. And in a situation like this one, he's just looking for reassurance. No big deal. You know when you reach out to a friend and you go and you're like, hey, I have this issue. I think the majority of us expect some amount of coddling. But if we think high schoolers and people we've had similar interactions with, especially ones where we're used to some of their shenanigans, this is called attention seeking. As in Chitose and this situation with Yua is looking to be justified for the behaviors he has by the people closest to him that are part of the reason for said rumor. He wants to hear it from that kind of person that he's not the issue here. Like what's being said just isn't true. Starting to follow what I'm saying? Because if you're not, I can absolutely do some gold medal mental gymnastics for this. Just think about what Yua does in this interaction. She literally doesn't even deny the accusations, meaning she wants him to own these actions, or at least trying to hold him accountable for them. And this is also something that you guys should just do if you see people doing this shit as well. Like seriously, do not validate the negative behaviors of others, because this leads him to reacting like, what? Not you too? So not only does he not get reassured, but then he also even has it more on his mind, where if I really want to stretch it, this led to him using Kenta to get it out of his head. And it would be even more to my point about him knowing how to use others to dominate situations, all while being incapable of handling and processing things in his lonesome. And after not receiving the validation with the manslut claims from Yua, I imagine him having to bring a shut-in back to school and realizing that same shut-in had incel-coded thoughts probably made him think it was worth trying to identify whether that was the original poster for the online claims of him being a man whore. And the longer this series goes, I think the more we're gonna see these insecurities start leaking out in these instances.
悪かった
Which is a very good thing. These are breadcrumbs being placed for us to figure this out about this character. He's interesting because everyone says he's perfect, and our first interaction with him is him jokingly getting insecure, where with more context from the series, the less it actually looks like a joke and more of a hint. Now, there was some mild discussion from the comments on my last video about him being insufferable, and people who have similar self-doubts or insecurities to someone like Kenta. I could definitely see people being frustrated with an individual like this, where I agree with what Chitose said to Kenta. I do think people tend to glamorize popularity and individual confidence, because it is not uncommon for people who see others with sort of golden traits to expect those individuals to be grateful for what they have, so the least they can do is accept criticism, when in reality that criticism is really just nitpicking and partial obsession. Rather than looking past their flaws, people are looking for their flaws, where a lot of the time, people like this are just individuals with confidence and candor, meaning I'm not ashamed of myself, this is who I am, when a lot of the time, that's not necessarily true. Some of those people are trying to improve themselves or reach that sort of person, as is the case with Chitose, where we can literally see he is not always confident in himself, or we would see it with the way that he reaches out to other people, because he would reach out to them with confidence and not indecisiveness. Here's a little life tip for you guys, and if you want credibility to my words, I did go to school for mental health and adolescence, and I do have a degree in social work, and a lot of the knowledge that helped me get my degree and also helps me with my work comes from experience. So if you have a hard time believing what I'm saying, literally just keep it in the back of your mind so you can at least recognize some of the stuff that I'm saying for if it ever comes up in your life. But this advice just has to do with us as people in general, where nothing you say or do will ever actually have weight on how others perceive you. Because oftentimes we make justifications or condemn people for actions completely based on our own biases. Where the point Chitose makes with Kenta about not judging others before you actually know who they are, and what my point has to say about why Chitose is insecure, relates entirely to the premise that we judge and love people based on how we see them and not by anything that they actually do. That's why Chitose made it a point to learn about Kenta before confronting him. Chitose is aware of how his biases could make him poorly attack Kenta's aversion to talking, where if Chitose can show that he understands Kenta, he can open the conversation up. Chitose also knows that Kenta is being ignorant, where getting to know him is the best way to get his point across if he's not too far gone. Ultimately, that's saying the things people do around us can lead us to our decisions, but the reality is we never truly know or understand the people around us, because oftentimes we're not too concerned with it. We will demonize or idolize people, and very little of them actually has to do with how we perceive them, which is why I can say Chitose is heavily covering for his insecurities, because if he wasn't, he would just unapologetically be himself. But likely, he had one too many instances of his true persona being shunned, and being shunned is probably not something that fits how he wants to be. The big difference Chitose has in comparison to a lot of people that struggle with this issue, though he's putting on a mask, he knows that the mask is how he himself wants to be, where the actions he's taking towards that change is just a path of self-improvement, which is a work in progress at this moment. Where if he misunderstands or poorly handles something, he's not going to dismiss accountability like some of the fucking idiots in your friend group. He'll actually own the issue that he has, where I'm sure a lot of you will notice people who tend to mask can find themselves saying things like, so-and-so said this, so I needed to do this, or so-and-so did that, so I wanted to say this. You are fully accountable for the actions and decisions that you make. If you choose to react to someone else's actions, then the action that you took is still your action. You are responsible for that. So if it's gonna backfire, own it, or no one's gonna ever understand the kind of person that you are, because you're always trying to be in this middle ground. So don't let other people's inability to understand you be the reason that you lose sight of who you are. If they are not receptive to the decisions that you make, it just means that they do not receive you as a person. And you should not be sorry for the type of person that you are or the person that you want to be. But if you're going to be sorry about something, make sure that the thing that you did was something you fully wanted to do, so you can confidently be sorry for it and appropriately fix it for next time. Just don't be the person that you think people want you to be. Be the person that you want to be, unless you want to be like a freak, I don't know. And this sort of change is going to be uncomfortable, because when you wear your heart on your sleeve, you're going to be self-conscious about that.
まったく、健太がやっと前を向いて歩き始めたっていうのに。
But the best part about that means you have full control of how that version of you fixes things, changes yourself, etc. You get it. The point is, that is what makes Chitose different than the people with the problems that we just identified. We see him having those self-doubts and insecurities because that is how changing works. He is a high schooler, and we all figure things out differently. So him not being horribly confident in his actions makes sense to me. He's on the path to becoming the image of himself that he wants to be. But right now, he's realizing the things that have worked in the past for him no longer are, which means that this story we're now seeing with him is probably the next life lesson to his path of self-improvement. We even see in this conversation with Haru that he doesn't even know how to justify or validate the thoughts and actions that he's taking with this process. And all this is what makes episode 3 stand out so heavily to me. And even the next 2 episodes only enhance this thought.
こいつ、急にどうしたんだ？
もうサクが紛らわしい言い方するからでしょ。
Because I feel like everything that was happening here was sort of the culmination of what was going on in 1 and 2, and 4 and 5 are the payoff to the setup from this episode. Because since this episode, things have started to feel tense, and I think there's going to be this sort of tension-pulling sensation that's going to truly test or even break Chitose's comfort zone.
意外とこういう方がドキッとしない？
Nanase bringing attention to herself in episode 4 here, and I should mention the 1 and 3 as well, allowed us to get an even deeper look at Chitose's indecisive nature. And in that episode 3, she planted seeds of anxiety, which is brought back up at the end of episode 4. But I do think this is because the episode focuses a lot on Chitose playing that sort of hero saves the day at the last minute role. And in this episode where I thought Kenta did hold himself up well, and the only reason that he even had his faith shaken was due to his old friends providing new information that was really meant to break him apart. And if we think about episode 3 in this context, that I think made him more vulnerable to this information was his classmates giving him shit, which I believe only existed to get under Chitose's skin. I believe the anime is trying to break Chitose down, where there are characters who literally are preying on that downfall. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but you know. Where this Chitose Saku hero moment that we have with Kenta, I believe is going to be one of the last that we see in this season. I think there's a reason the interaction that we get after this is showcasing Chitose's indecisiveness. And again, if this was a one-off thing, you probably could dismiss it, but they do it back to back with the end of this episode and the beginning of episode 5, showcasing the depth of the indecisiveness Chitose is experiencing. Where the interactions he has with Nanase in episode 5 are a clear sign to me that the anime is telling us Chitose is gonna bite off more than he can chew. But let's finish episode 4 first, because while I do think that Chitose seems to be a little bit more himself in this episode, I do think that it was not wholly his doing. Hold on, what the fuck was her name? Yuko was popping off during this hero moment Chitose was having. As a matter of fact, it was an MVP performance. I was sold by Nanase when the trailer dropped, but Yuko is putting up generational stats with this little 3-episode arc we have. As a matter of fact, I think it's what saved Chitose from actually breaking down a little bit in this scene, because you can kind of see he is getting a little bit personal with this issue, because he's really sick of the behavior of this old friend group of Kenta's. Her showing up in the way that she did was the perfect touch to cement her role in this story, where Chitose feels like the bait while Yuko deals the killing blow to shut the dumb friends up. Because when we conclude this arc and Asuka and Chitose meet up, this interlude almost feels a little too forced, because like I said, I think we can expect Chitose to have his world turned upside down soon, where I think him being indecisive here is the story's way of telling us that this is the wrong choice to make, where the camera focuses on him not taking her hand and then her acknowledging his distance. This mystifying relationship between Chitose and Asuka seems to be a sign to what I was talking about when we think of his past failures. I'm not going to speculate what that was just yet, but I think it's related to why he has this distance with her, and is probably due to the fact that he can't confidently say he is his perfect self. I do want to go more into this relationship specifically, but I want to wait for just a little bit more information. But I am curious what other people think of this relationship, so let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts. And the only thing that I think I would want to confidently speculate on is that the anime really wants to make it seem like Chitose is into Asuka more than the other girls, which really just feels a little too obvious. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think so, because especially when we see that arm's length indecisive insecurity with the Miss Bad Bitch I'm That Girl Yuzuki Nanase, we see him shy away and begin to feel out Nanase's request rather than just immediately accepting it. Where in the previous episode where they hinted at this conversation, he made it a point to say that he's not going to turn down a pretty girl in need. But then to contradict himself goes against the brand of Chitose Saku. And you're welcome to say I'm reaching, but stuff like this is intentional when it comes to writing and filmmaking. And I predicted this in my last video about how he was going to need to deal with someone similar to himself. And if we think about Chitose and Nanase's interaction, especially when we get to the point where he starts picking that fight, you can begin to understand why this character would need to feel out a request like this. Because how he ended up in that 3v1, I believe, is a prelude to the climax of Chitose being Nanase's boyfriend. Because if we're using everything that I've mentioned up to now, we can clearly see he does not like being caught with his pants down. As a matter of fact, he's quite insecure about it. That's why he likes to wait until the last minute, so that he has all the information in order to dominate the situation that he's going to be getting himself into. Which is why we see him bait the goons into an altercation. He wants to bait the pussy boy out so that he knows exactly who he's dealing with. Because like we've been mentioning up to now, unknown variables for our little Chitose are a big no-no. Which is why he would contradict himself in the first place. He needed to understand how Nanase felt about it, and just exactly what the weight behind her request actually was. This way he extracted information out of Nanase was very similar to how he had Haru coax information out of him, but this interaction was a little bit more layered than that. There was probably a concern for if this request would unintentionally reveal something about him that he doesn't want other people to know. As we've learned, he's not willing to sacrifice his image for the sake of results, where if he were to fail or burden somebody, that would go against the brand of Chitose Saku. And it's not that he wouldn't properly necessarily own up to those actions. Obviously, we've established he is an accountable individual, but it breaks apart the vision that he has for how to pursue the ideal version of Chitose Saku. This is seriously just such a cool and dynamic character, guys. And after this episode, I'm even more convinced of it because I now can confidently say that the people around him have a better idea of Chitose's limitations more than Chitose himself. And the show told us that Haru and Nanase are not super familiar with Chitose, like they know who he is obviously, but they were not close. So Nanase being able to immediately clock Chitose on a bunch of just these little things.
見てたな。
He just like me for real. But the big thing that stands out with her is she knew exactly how to get his attention and then how to follow it up so she can get him on her side. She was willing to go and throw her dignity away to fully showcase the depth of her desperation and how necessary it is for him to be the person that helps with this issue. And I imagine she goes this far because she knows who he is. I think we can all assume this little playboy attitude he has is really just the facade, just an extra layer for the confidence to really get sent home. But she is a baddie, so I know her hitting us with that, I bet had the whole class locked the fuck in. And don't lie to me, I know you played that scene at a minimum 3 times.
待って。お願い。少し休ませて。
But I do think we're reaching the point of no return for this version of Chitose Saku. I think him having to interact with someone that he perceives as almost like looking into a mirror is the story's way of being abhorrently obvious that Chitose is going to need to do some reflecting after he helps her with this issue. I do really hope that it's not going to go into a way where Nanase is going to be like super obsessive over him. I just think that would be very bland writing. And as we reach this sort of middle part of the anime, I do expect this to be our big character defining arc. But whether it goes the way that I want or it just leads to him having a shift in his priorities, I'm probably going to be fine with it, especially since these last 3 episodes have seriously been something unique to watch for this genre. And the character interactions are just so nice to sit through.
私とサクが付き合い始めるってそんなにおかしいこと？おかしい。少なくとも今のユズキとサクじゃ絶対にありえない。
I low-key be rewinding the episodes if there's ever like one-on-one scenes. Though it's mega funny. They did all these character introductions and even people in my comments couldn't remember any of the characters' names. And they even gutted the pacing for the first 2 episodes to introduce the characters, where had they been introduced naturally, they would have been more memorable. Because when you rush your story or bloat scenes with information, you're gonna lose your audience's attention. Where I think people naturally are just more engaged by a sense of mystery. But what do you guys think? Do we think the show's cooking? I know I struggle to sit through harems unless there's a little gimmick behind it, though I do like Nisekoi, but I really just like Chitoge, and I watched this when I was like 13, 14. When the fuck did this drop? Jesus Christ. But genuinely, I am curious what you guys think. Obviously, if you've read the light novel, keep the spoilers to yourself, because I'm having a lot of fun dissecting this series for us anime-only watchers. And if you're having fun with this as well, let me know with a like and a comment. And if you want to stay up to date with me talking about this series, you know to hit that subscribe button, because every YouTuber ever says this shit. I really hate saying this stuff, but apparently it actually makes you guys remember, hey, that button actually exists, and it gives me a daily dopamine boost. But regardless, I hope you guys had a great weekend, and I hope that you guys have a great week ahead of you. If I do see a demand for the Chitose vids, I'll make sure that I shit that out of my blistering birth canal on Tuesday or Wednesday this week so y'all can enjoy that. But hey, if you managed to make it this far, thanks for watching.